Here's exactly where I put my money every time I get paid. Now, in this video, I want you to assume that you're starting from scratch, and this is just gonna be like a big money flow chart. For most people, they get paid, it goes into their checking account, they don't budget for it, they don't track their own money, and for the most part, they don't know where their money is going, and that's just really hurting yourself. So in today's video, we're gonna talk about paying ourselves first in 7 easy steps, starting with step number 1. Step number 1 is gonna be to make any payments on the debts that you might owe. So that includes student loan payments, auto loan payments, and even credit card payments. Now, making the minimum payment here is really important because if you actually miss an on-time payment, your credit score will suffer. So one thing that I think many people don't realize is that by having a good credit score, it actually saves you money in the long run because you're gonna be able to qualify for much lower rates for your bigger loan payments like your mortgage. So how do we maintain this good credit score? It is by making on-time payments. Now, here's a handy little chart that I wanna show you guys. This is how your score is affected by your on-time payments. You can see that if you make 99% or more of on-time payments, that's actually considered, quote, good. Now, 100% would be excellent. Once you drop below 97%, that's actually considered poor. And that means if you just miss 1 out of 20 payments, you are doing very poorly. So the credit score in the US is very sensitive to on-time payments. Now, if you are in another country, you just wanna make sure that your debt is being paid off on time. Okay, let's go on to step number 2 of where I would put my money every paycheck, and that is for necessities. So in step number 2, you wanna put money aside for rent, mortgages, transportation, food, healthcare, utilities, etc. So we're not talking about fancier items here. So for example, everybody drinks water. You need that to stay alive. Now, I have this empty glass of San Pellegrino sparkling water. This is an option for a fancier type of water. It's an unnecessary expense, and it's really gonna do the same job of keeping your thirst quenched as this tap water I have in this bottle. Same thing with gifts to your family and friends. You don't really need gifts to stay alive. That is not a necessity. I mean, unless you're Santa Claus or something. So the idea here is that you wanna prioritize putting money aside just for basically getting by. Now, this bare minimum number that you might have is gonna be different for everyone and depending on your cost of living area. So ideally, this is gonna be less than 50% of your gross paycheck per month so that we can flow our money into the other steps of this video. But once you have those first 2 steps taken care of, I would call that the financial foundation. What you can do is go on to step number 3, and that's to fill up an emergency fund. Now, if you've watched some of my videos in the past, you know that I talk about the emergency fund a lot. It's a fund that includes 3 to 6 months of your living expenses tucked away, and as its name implies, you only use that money for emergencies. So if your monthly needs cost you around $2,000 a month, then your emergency fund target should be around $6,000 in liquid cash. Of course, having more money in your emergency fund is going to be a great thing, but this is the first thing I'm going to be doing before I move on to the other steps of investing and allocating my money. In terms of where to keep it, I would put it in a savings account that generates you some interest. So right now, there are plenty of high yield savings accounts out there, and the idea here is that as long as it's liquid, which means you have access to it at any time, you might as well be getting paid a little bit of money on your money that's being saved. Right now, some of the banks paying a high interest rate for saving your money include, for example, SoFi. Their high yield savings account right now pays up to 4.00% APY. I'll actually leave a link down below for that in case you want to check it out after this video. Now, there are plenty of other options that we've talked about on this channel as well, and you can also just Google high yield savings account and I'll give you a big list of all the different types of accounts that are paying a high percentage APY. The main important thing to look for is that they include FDIC insurance. Now, 99.9% of all these banks will include that, so you should be covered there. All right, step number 4 is that we want to make sure that a percentage of our paycheck is being set aside and allocated into our retirement fund. Now, I think 65% of you watching my channel are from the United States, so here we have employer-sponsored 401k plans. However, if you're in the UK, they have something called a workplace pension. In Australia, they have something called the superannuation, and in Canada, they have RRSPs. In any case, you want to be saving a percentage of every single paycheck into your retirement fund. Now, a recommended goal by many financial experts out there is to save roughly between 6 and 12% of every paycheck into your retirement. It's even better if you can get that allocation deducted from your paycheck before you even see it. That way, it's hopefully tax deductible, so you get some tax benefits, and you won't be able to see it and actually play around with that money, so you won't be tempted to spend it. Another perk of the 401k, at least in the United States, is that oftentimes an employer will match your contribution up to a certain amount. So just to make the number simple here, let's say you make $100,000 a year and your employer might match up to 3% of your salary. That's about $3,000 of free money in contributions that your employer might give you for your retirement account alone. If that's an option for you, that's always something that you're going to want to do, because literally that is the best return on your investment possible. Now, beyond the match percentage, if you want to save more of your salary into your 401k, that's a decision that's ultimately up to you, but it actually brings me to my next point. Oftentimes there is a trade-off of liquidity and contributing to your 401k. And due to the rules of how the 401k is actually set up, that means you're actually going to take a penalty on if you withdraw early from these retirement accounts. This creates a dilemma for many people, because let's say you start to contribute to your retirement account. Well, what if you need that money? It's not very liquid and you don't want to pay a penalty. And so oftentimes people are kind of faced with this kind of opportunity cost dilemma. Now, I'm about to tell you my honest opinion, which might get me a little bit roasted in the comments here, but in my opinion, a 401k plan is a type of forced savings account in America, and honestly, that is the best option for most people. Because most people in the United States, they suck at savings. We've actually seen the data. Most Americans save between 4 to 5% of their gross savings, versus in other countries, they're saving closer to 30, 40, or 50%. In addition to that, 64% of people in America live paycheck to paycheck, so I definitely agree that forced savings is probably a pretty good idea for the majority of people. However, I don't love being told that we should all just invest in a 401k, because that's what everybody does. I even remember a time when I was 23, a coworker was like, "Why aren't you contributing to your 401k?" And they made me feel a little bit like I was making a bad financial decision by not doing so. I don't love statements that are like blanket statements for personal finance, because I feel like personal finance is so personal and it depends on what you need and what your priorities are in life. So the truth is that you need to do some thinking for yourself, and that's basically what I want to do on this channel. I want you guys to think for yourself when it comes to personal finance decisions. If you think you can make more money with the cash that you have in hand today rather than contributing maximum amounts to your 401k plan, then perhaps you do that. But for most people, I'm going to say this right now, for most people, the 401k is going to be the safest one in terms of building your wealth. So let's actually do some math here to illustrate. So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States, the median income is about $55,000 a year. So if you make that and you set aside 10% of your pre-tax income for retirement, that means every single year you're going to be saving roughly $5,500 a year for your retirement. If you contribute that to your 401k and give it 35 years to grow at the average S&P return of 8% a year, it should be well worth over $1 million by the time you retire. So if you were thinking about foregoing your 401k plan, that's basically the benchmark that you would have to beat. You would have to make at least $1.023 million in 35 years to make it make sense. If you can't say with a 95% or more degree of certainty that you can make more than that in 35 years by yourself, then the 401k, just stick with the 401k. All right, step number 5 would be to pay off any remaining high interest rate debt. Now, anything over 15% interest rate would be considered high interest rate debt in my opinion. Oftentimes people will ask me if you can still invest while you have some debt, and my answer is if it's low enough of an interest rate debt, then I see no problem with that. So for example, if you have student loans, perhaps less than 5%, or maybe a 30-year mortgage of less than 5% interest rate as well, then I see no issue with investing at the same time that you pay off that debt. However, in terms of high interest rate debt, you're probably just better off paying that off right away, because the chances are you're not going to get that same return in the market. When it comes to paying off debt, you have a couple different methods to pay it off really quickly. The first method is a very popular method, and it's called the avalanche method. This prioritizes the highest interest rate debt that you might have to be paid off first. So let's say you have 3 sources of debt: car payments, credit card payments, and student loans. Pretend you owe $5,000 on each of these, and the interest rates are as follows: 7% interest rate on your car, 20% on your credit card, and 5% on your student loans. The correct order to pay off your debt in this case would be the credit card first, since it has the highest interest rate of 20%, then the car, which is 7%, and then finally the student loans. This is going to be the most financially efficient way to pay off your debt, because you're getting rid of the debt source that's costing you the most amount of money. There is another method though called the snowball method, and according to 2 professors at Kellogg Business School, they say that, quote, paying off a small balance, a quick win, if you will, can make you feel good about yourself and actually help you pay off more debt in the long run. So if you have a list of debts, let's say you have the following, you could do this method. First, you want to sort your debt by balance size from smallest to largest. Once you do that, you want to pay off the smallest one first while making minimum payments on all the other remaining debt. That way, it's going to feel like you're gaining momentum every time you pay off a single debt source because the number of total debt sources that you have is going to be shrinking. You can see that if you started with a student loan balance, you actually might get demoralized early on. So imagine paying that off for 6 months and not getting